In the ultimate twist of fate, anti-trafficking takes me down a second time. Part 51 of sharing my story on here because it's so much easier than writing another book. So in 2018, there was a couple sets of legislation that passed, and thank you, Trump. It was FOSTA and SESTA, and they were designed to protect trafficking survivors and like punish traffickers. And it's basically just a set of policies that changed the way social media works, and it caused shadow banning or just complete banning for a lot of people that it was not intended for. So like if there were coaches that worked on intimacy, or like a lot of the other things that are adult-like but aren't trafficking, it caused this mass shadow bannings of anybody that just said certain things. There were keywords that if you said those words, they would just like make it to where your stuff wasn't visible. And that was exactly what happened with Jess's booty. And so we couldn't figure out why we weren't growing. Like we were getting great engagement, great shares, like everything was going, but it just wasn't really going. And when I discovered the shadow ban and like how things functioned, it answered all of my questions. And I was like, this is so uncool, because like I'm wanting to grow and scale this business the best we can, because it's hard to scale a business that is like manufactured with yourself and with other artists. And so like that's what I mean by best you can. You can scale lots of businesses, but homemade things is much more difficult to scale because you actually have to manufacture and produce what you're selling. But this shadow ban actually went on for a few months before I figured it out. And during this entire time, I am just waking up so early because I can't sleep. Like I'm stressed out of my mind. Things aren't right. And I've got to make coffee like over the fire. And so I would wake up like at 3-4 o'clock in the morning and go out to the fire, and I was really learning how to connect with nature. I was learning a different part of me, different sides of me, really learning to just sit in myself and examine myself in a different way. And I think it's because I was so connected to nature, because that was my only choice, it seemed, at that point in time. It was, I don't know what that was. It was to just like be a part of nature and come to terms with it, because when you're living mostly outside, you feel the seasons. And there were so many things that I didn't know would happen. Like it snowed at the beach the year after the storm. And this was when I started reading the Farmer's Almanac and like understanding the seasonal cycles and the growth cycles, and how like we as humans can better live with our planet. And I had always been very ethical in my consumerism, especially because during the anti-trafficking, I would hear other speakers talking about manufacturing and labor and how things are made. Like I had hit this point where it was really I couldn't even walk into like a Walmart, and I've left my cart full of stuff in Walmart and just walked out because for years I couldn't handle the smell. And I actually think in a lot of ways that was very healthy. I went back into shopping at those types of stores simply because we didn't have other options. Like it was necessity. We needed to, especially like after a hurricane. So I was on the inside wrestling with all of this guilt around consumerism and using plastic water bottles, and like how do you deal with and reconcile those things inside of you when you desire to live different, but you're really kind of living in like extreme poverty, and it's like third world country type stuff. And it created all of these like paradoxes inside of me that I was trying to reckon with, that I was reckoning with, like while sitting under the trees, watching the fire, and just learning to identify the parts of me at an even deeper level, and then reading a shit ton of books. So I started listening to lots of different books on money and entrepreneurship and wealth building, because I was like, I need an education again. Like, I know I've already done this once, but clearly I've lost my touch somewhere along the way, because I wouldn't be living in this environment if I didn't like need to learn something. So what is it that I need to learn? And I'm doing shit that I've never done before, like really using a chainsaw. There was one time, like, the grass would grow like 8 feet tall, and it was so tall you couldn't see people coming. Like, you just had to keep it at bay. And the weed whacker was just awful, because it wouldn't, like, it would just all get tangled up. Like, we needed industrial stuff. And I had this brilliant idea. I was like, why don't I just burn it? And it worked quite a few times, like just a normal torch and burning the weeds. And I'm super careful and very like, don't want to burn anything down, even though there's really nothing around us besides houses that probably need to be burnt down. But like, we had just gotten power. I'm not trying to set the whole neighborhood on fire. And so we would burn the back part of our yard so that we could actually use it, because these weeds would get in grass. It would get so tall. But there was one time that I was burning the yard, and it was a super deep, thick area. And I didn't notice that a tree had fallen like at the base of it. And I had somehow lit the inside of that tree on fire. So a fire caught at the other end of the tree. And it didn't get very far, but oh, it was a very terrifying moment. And with our little hose trying to put out this fire, oh my goodness, that reminded me of a story from when I was younger with my stepfather. We had I'm just going to tell you a rabbit trail story because it's funny. We had a like single car garage that was one of the really old ones when that house that we had bought right after my dad died. So I must have been about 12, 13 years old. And it was one of those really old one-car garages. And he wanted to tear it down and put in a new shop. And he took a chainsaw and cut all the way around that little old garage, and then rammed it backwards with his flatbed truck and lit it on fire. And we did this while Mom was at work. And it was quite funny, but he ended up burning the power lines overhead and cut out power for half the town. And that was not good. Like, do not recommend, but it makes for a really good story. And he got his shop, and it only cost him an extra few $1,000s that he probably could have paid someone to take it away, but he had to pay for the wires and some other stuff. So that happens. One of the core memories for the kids was throwing plates, because sometimes when we're in this small little place, because we would kind of like hibernate sometimes in this RV that we couldn't like all sleep in comfortably, but it was like the inside and where there was some lighting, and we had a sink in there, and like it just made sense. So we'd all be in this tiny little RV. Well, it was a big RV, but you get 6 or 7 people in there, and it's a lot. And when they'd start yakking at each other, like bickering, one day with quite a bit too much alcohol in me, I was like, here, catch. And I threw my youngest son, who at this time is probably like 7 or 8 years old. I threw him a plate. And so every time they would start bickering, we would just start tossing plates to each other. And we only broke a few, but the intensity of like, what happens if you drop the plate, always stopped the bickering immediately. And it was just one of those things that when my youngest son tells a story, he's just like, yeah, careful, watch your attitude, Mom will start throwing plates. Really, it's just gently tossing to each other, but it makes everyone just be like, we don't want to break a plate. That's like, so watch yourself, or we might start throwing plates. One day sitting outside, I watched a video from Greta Thunberg, the young teenage activist. She's probably not a teenager anymore, but at the time she was. And she was addressing the UN. And she said something that changed me so completely. And this was the first big key for us, like really getting out of the situation. And it changed my life so completely. Those big perspective shifts, but it's getting dark. We'll do this next time.